And as long as that loyalty remains, as long as you unconsciously keep playing the role you've outgrown, the field has no choice but to reflect back the same reality. Again and again, not because you're broken, not because you're cursed, but because you're still anchoring that timeline through identity. Let's be clear, the quantum field doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to what you're being, and being is not just about what you say or think. It's about the vibration you normalize, the frequency you choose to embody on autopilot. So if you're still identifying as the one who struggles, as the one who's always almost there, as the one who tries but never fully arrives, then no matter how much vision boarding, scripting, or meditating you do, the field will mirror that default frequency, not to punish you but to show you what you're still agreeing to. Here's the truth most don't want to admit: you can't bring your old self into your new reality. You can't carry the emotional codes of lack, guilt, or unworthiness into a timeline built on sovereignty. Something has to die, and that something is you. Not your body, not your soul, but the construct you've called me, the psychological suit you've worn for years, the persona made of memories, trauma responses, inherited beliefs, survival strategies, the one who knows how to suffer, how to shrink, how to stay safe. That version of you is not real, but it's been real enough to manifest a lifetime, and now it must collapse. But here's what makes it difficult. You think that version is you. You've rehearsed it so well, neurologically, emotionally, socially, that to let it go feels like annihilation. And in a way, it is. Because identity collapse feels like death. The body shakes, the mind resists, the nervous system panics, not because something's wrong, but because you're stepping beyond the known frequency range. You're leaving the comfort zone of familiar suffering. That's why this process isn't for the faint of heart. It requires courage, presence, and deep energetic honesty. So, how do you collapse your old self without getting pulled back into its orbit? You start by telling the truth. Not the story, not the excuse, not the spiritual bypass. The truth, the raw, vulnerable, inconvenient truth of what that self has cost you, emotionally, relationally, spiritually. You shine a light on the patterns you've normalized. You feel what it actually feels like to be that version. And then, most importantly, you decide it's over. Not tomorrow, not when it's convenient, now. That's when the quantum field listens. That's when reality rearranges. Because here's what most people don't understand. Identity is a frequency lock. As long as you identify as the struggler, the overthinker, the unlovable, the one who needs to heal before receiving, you're sending out a stable signal, and the field is matching it with clockwork precision. But the moment you say, "This is no longer who I choose to be," and back it with aligned emotion and action, the lock opens, the field recalibrates, and reality, like liquid, begins to flow into new form. Now here's where the shift becomes magnetic. Once you collapse the old self, there's a temporary void, a space of disorientation, silence, vulnerability. This is the in between, the quantum gap, the vibrational hallway between timelines. Most people run from it. They rush to fill it with noise, action, distraction. But if you can sit in it, if you can breathe in that gap and not flinch, the new self begins to rise, not from effort, from resonance, not from striving, from embodiment. Because at your core, you already know who you are becoming. You felt glimpses of it in that way your body lights up around certain people, in the moments of flow, when you forget to doubt yourself in the visions that visit you in stillness. That version of you is not a fantasy. It's a frequency, and it's been calling you home. So how do you stabilize that frequency? You speak from it. This is what neuroscientists call synaptic pruning and neuroplasticity. But in the language of transformation, we call it identity death. The you that you've been, with all its habits, reactions, traumas, and assumptions, is a network of reinforced circuits, Every time you feel unworthy, react with fear, or spiral into doubt, you're firing the same synaptic patterns, and those patterns over time become your personality, which becomes your personal reality. But here's the twist. When you interrupt those patterns even once, you send a signal of incoherence. The loop breaks, the system collapses, and in that moment, a new timeline becomes accessible. Think of your identity like a scaffolding made of electrical wires. Your attention is the electricity, your emotions are the voltage, and the more you feed a certain thought-emotion combo, the stronger that structure becomes. But when you remove the power, when you stop feeding the emotion of the old self, the scaffolding begins to disintegrate. This is what we mean by neural collapse, and it's quantum. You are both the wave, infinite formless potential, and the particle, the collapsed crystallized version of that potential. But you are not stuck as one or the other. You are the conscious chooser, and your choice is encoded through coherence. Now let's break the pattern for a second, because there's a trap here. You might be thinking, if it's all about coherence, I just need to stay in a high vibration. But that's not entirely true. Coherence isn't about pretending to be happy. It's not about bypassing your pain. It's about alignment between what you feel, what you believe, and what you intend. If you feel grief and you allow that feeling to be fully acknowledged, you are still in coherence. If you feel anger but you don't suppress it, or shame it, you are incoherence. It's resistance that breaks the field, not emotion. That's why the work of transformation isn't about perfection. It's about permission. Permission to feel, permission to collapse, permission to rebuild. Dr. Joe Dispenza's research shows that when people enter a state of heart-brain coherence, their electromagnetic field expands, their DNA expression changes, their immune system strengthens, and most importantly, their brain waves shift into a theta-gamma blend, which is the doorway to the subconscious and the quantum field. In that state, the boundary between imagination and physicality becomes thin. You're no longer just thinking of a new reality. You're tuning into it. So, what does this mean for you practically? It means that the fastest way to jump timelines is not by doing more, but by being differently. It means that every time you become the observer of your thoughts, where without judgment, you regain creative control. It means that every time you drop into stillness, coherence, or emotional clarity, you're sending a cleaner signal to the quantum field, and the field responds with upgraded data. And above all, it means that you don't need to change the world outside. You need to change your lens. Because the observer is the creator, the signal is the selector, and the vibration is the key. Now, let's stretch the metaphor even more. Imagine the quantum field as a giant web of infinite doors, each one representing a version of your life. Every time you change your emotional state, a door unlocks. Every time you sustain that state, the door opens. And every time you embody the self who lives behind that door, you walk through and everything changes. But here's the catch. The old doors don't disappear. They remain available, which means you must choose to keep walking. You must choose to stay in the frequency of the new, not for a moment, not just during meditation, but in the little decisions, the micro choices, the subtle shifts in identity throughout your day. Because the moment you doubt, the moment you hesitate, the moment you return to the emotional home of your old self, you jump back. Quantum jumping is not a one-time leap. It's a continuous dance, a feedback loop between your brain, your heart, and the field. So the real question isn't how do I shift, it's can I hold the shift long enough for reality to catch up. In the next chapter we'll go deeper into this, because while the science shows us how the field responds to internal alignment, what keeps most people trapped is the emotional gravity of their old identity. And unless you collapse who you think you are, you'll keep projecting that version into every New field you enter, you're not stuck. You're just too loyal to an outdated version of yourself. You walk from it, you decide from it before the evidence, before the proof, because the proof isn't what makes the jump real. The proof is what appears after you've already jumped. Remember, the field rearranges in response to coherence, and coherence happens when your identity, your emotion, and your behavior all say the same thing. I am now the one who. That's when timelines collapse. That's when people vanish. That's when synchronicities increase. That's when the matrix of your old reality starts to glitch because it no longer recognizes you. And when that happens, you'll be tempted to go back, to return to the version of you that was predictable, safe, known. But don't. Because the unknown you've stepped into is not empty. It's pregnant with the next version of your life. And that life isn't built by hustling harder. It's accessed through vibrational alignment. Now take a breath, feel into your body, scan for any part of you still clinging to an expired self, not to shame it but to witness it. And when you're ready, type in the comments, I collapse. My new self. Let this be your energetic declaration. Let the words be more than text. Let them be vibration. Let them echo across timelines, because sometimes the smallest sentence can close a loop that's been open for lifetimes. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into how to navigate from this space of collapse into the intentional creation of your next version. Because now that the old self is dissolving, the real work begins, holding the new frequency long enough to anchor the new reality. You've already collapsed the old identity. Now comes the initiation. Can you hold the frequency of the new reality before the world reflects it back? Most people jump, but then panic in the void. They expect the shift to feel like fireworks, a sudden rush of clarity, instant confirmation. But quantum navigation is subtler. It's not a sprint, it's not a breakthrough, it's a recalibration. And in that recalibration, the field is listening, not to your words but to your stability of signal. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most don't create their reality, they recreate their memory of reality. Even when trying to change, they're still referencing the past, still filtering their decisions through the emotional architecture of who they used to be. And that's why they don't jump, they loop. But you're not here to loop, you're here to navigate. To do that, you need a new compass, not built from logic or goals, but from vibrational alignment, because timelines are not places you go, they are states you stabilize. And when your inner state becomes unshakable, the outer world conforms to it like clay around a mold. So the question becomes, how do you stabilize a state that doesn't yet feel real? Start here. Accept that your nervous system will protest. It's wired for familiarity, not expansion. So when you begin to embody a version of yourself that feels foreign, more powerful, more open, more abundant, your body may panic. You may feel resistance, brain fog, self-doubt, fatigue. This isn't failure, it's feedback. The feedback says you're stepping into unknown circuitry, and we don't yet have emotional proof it's safe. But remember, your body doesn't need proof, it needs presence. So when the fear arises, don't analyze it, don't fix it, hold it in coherence. Breathe into it, anchor into your heart. Come back to the frequency of the self you've chosen to become, and from that space act, because action is not just movement, it's message. When you take action from the frequency of your future self, you send a broadcast through the quantum field that says, this is who I am now, and the field being holographic and instantaneous, karma begins to reorganize. Joe Dispenza calls this process getting beyond the known, not just intellectually but neurologically and energetically. When you do, you enter the space where creation becomes fluid. Now let's talk tools. There are specific practices that can help you lock in the new signal, but none of them work unless they're driven by coherence. So don't do these as rituals for the sake of routine. Do them as acts of remembrance, anchors into the frequency of the self you are becoming. 1. Coherent visualization. This is not daydreaming. It's not passive hopping. It's embodied seeing, creating from a state of inner wholeness. Before you visualize, tune into your heart. Slow your breath. Drop into gratitude, not for something specific, but for the fact that you're choosing a new self. Then from that space, imagine not just the future reality, but your emotional state inside it. What does your posture feel like? What thoughts flow through that version of you? What does their ordinary day look like? Live inside that frequency. Even for 5 minutes, that's enough to rewire timelines. 2. Scripting from identity. Don't write about what you want. Write as the version of you who already has it. Use I am, not I hope. Describe your life in present tense. Anchor every sentence in emotion, texture, sensory detail. Let your nervous system experience it before the 3D catches up. This isn't fiction, it's frequency alignment. 3. Heart-brain coherence. Drop into the breath. Feel your heartbeat. Place one hand over your chest and another over your belly. Inhale for 5 counts. Exhale for 5. Feel a wave of gratitude build. It may start subtle. Stay with it. As the waves grow, your brain shifts into alpha and theta states, and the mind-body field opens. That's the space where navigation becomes intuitive and the jump stabilizes. But here's the deeper layer. Even with the best tools, the biggest trap is this waiting for evidence. The moment you ask where is it, the moment you doubt, you've already collapsed back into the old self. Because that question doesn't come from faith, it comes from fear. And the field doesn't respond to need, it responds to assumption. So your job isn't to prove the new self, it's to live it fully and unapologetically. Before the results show up, that's the test, that's the jump, and the more you hold the signal without needing confirmation, the faster the external reality begins to match. Not because you forced it, but because you finally got out of the way. Let's ground this in metaphor. Imagine you're tuning a radio to a specific station. At first, the signal is fuzzy. You turn the dial. Slightly static. You move it again. The music comes in, then fades. You adjust. You hold, and finally the frequency locks. The music becomes clear. That's quantum navigation. The static is doubt, fear, and identity collapse. The clarity is coherence, embodiment, and emotional congruence. And the dial, that's your moment-by-moment choice of who you are. Now ask yourself, what station have you been unconsciously tuned to? And what station are you choosing consciously from now on? Because when you start choosing from the future instead of reacting from the past, the world responds differently. The right people arrive, synchronicities accelerate, obstacles dissolve, not because you manipulated matter, but because you shifted vibration, and matter follows frequency. You don't need to chase the new reality. You need to stabilize as the version of you who lives there. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are simply becoming coherent. For the first time in lifetimes, in the next and final chapter, we'll close the loop. We'll return to the real reason quantum jumping is already part of your nature, and how you can begin to live as someone who not only jumps timelines but leads others across them. The shift is not coming. It's already here, waiting for you to remember it. There's a version of you right now breathing in another timeline, not hopping, not healing, not striving, but embodying, living, radiating the frequency of the life you once thought was impossible. And that version is not far away. It's not years ahead. It's one vibrational decision away. You've collapsed the old identity. You've tuned into the field. You've stabilized the signal. Now comes the final and most sacred act: trust. Not passive trust, not blind hope, but active embodied trust, the kind that walks like it already arrived, speaks like it already knows, and breathes like the future is happening now. Because it is you see in the quantum field all realities are now. Time is not linear. It's layered. Every outcome you've ever imagined, every breakthrough, every version of you that's already healed, loved, abundant, free, they're not out. They're here, superimposed like sheets of light, waiting to be collapsed into form by the only force that ever truly creates, your identity and coherence. This isn't about spiritual performance. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to fake it till you make it. You just have to become familiar with the new frequency, the new script, the new self. That's what creation really is. Familiarity with the unknown until it becomes your baseline. And when you cross that threshold, life becomes different, not just in outcomes but in texture. You begin to feel the quantum nature of things. You notice time stretching and collapsing. You feel guided instead of lost, nudged instead of pushed. Opportunities no longer come as surprises but as confirmations, because once you align with the self who already lives the life aligns with you. There is no effort in this, only awareness. There is no convincing, only choosing. You no longer beg the universe, you become it. You no longer chase signs, you embody the signal. You no longer try to be worthy. You remember that you've always been. And this is not just about individual transformation. It's collective, because every time you quantum jump, you collapse an old collective field too. You send out ripples of permission, silent transmissions that awaken others, not by preaching, but by existing in a frequency that reminds them they can choose too. We don't need more content. We need more living proof, and that's what you are becoming. You're not just shifting your life. You're shifting timelines for everyone connected to your field, seen and unseen. So the next time fear whispers, "What if it doesn't work?" answer with, "What if it already has?" The next time the old self tries to wear you like a costume, let it hang. Let it dissolve. Smile with compassion, but don't pick it back up, because you know now. Becoming is remembering. You're not creating from scratch. You're aligning with a version of you that already knows the way. Now, this journey doesn't end here. What you've begun in this video, the unraveling of the old, the tuning into the quantum field, the stabilization of your next self, it's only the beginning. And if you feel the call to go deeper, to refine the practice here, to hold this frequency consistently, then there's something waiting for you. It's an ebook called Awaken Your Quantum Power. It is a companion on your shift, guiding you with practical frameworks, methods, and energetic activations to help you jump consciously, consistently, and with clarity. Inside it, you'll also find the practical book, a space to record, embody, and stabilize your new timeline, exercises, scripts, rituals, real tools grounded in quantum principle and spiritual science. If that resonates with you, the link is in the pinned comment below this video. Open it not just with curiosity, but with intention. Because everything you touch in this field, you touch as the new self. Now take a breath, feel your body, notice how much has already shifted just by listening differently. That wasn't entertainment, that was activation. You're not watching these words, you're collapsing them, creating them, calling them into your now. This is not the end. This is where the real movement begins. Because you don't just shift for you, you shift for every timeline that's ever needed your light. We are a community of conscious creators, of quantum navigators, of frequency holders. And if you're still here, you've already jumped. Welcome. There's something scientists discovered that sounds more like ancient mysticism than physics, a truth so disturbing it shattered our understanding of reality. And it starts with this: reality only exists when you observe it. What you're about to learn in this video could change the way you see everything: your thoughts, your life, your past, even your future. This is the observer effect, and once you understand how it works, you'll never look at your life the same way again. Stay with me until the end, because I'm going to show you how to use this quantum secret not just to understand the universe, but to change your reality. From the inside out, let's begin with something most people never question. We're taught that reality is solid, that the world is made of objects measurable, predictable, mechanical. We're taught that what we see, hear, and touch is real, and that our thoughts, our imagination, our intentions, just fluff, just the byproducts of brain chemistry. But what if that's not true? What if the truth is much stranger? Because when you cross a certain line in physics, a line that classical science refuses to acknowledge, you step into a space that looks a lot like ancient mysticism. You enter a realm where thought influences matter, the observer shapes the observed, and where reality is not something out there, but something born inside you. Welcome to quantum mechanics, and more specifically to the one idea that shook the very foundation of everything. We thought we knew: the observer effect. Let me ask you something. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Now take that further. If a particle exists in a state of probability, as all quantum particles do, and no one observes it, is it even real? Physicist Vera Heisenberg, one of the founding fathers of quantum theory, once said, "What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning." In other words, reality responds to the way we observe it. It's not just there, waiting to be seen. It becomes real through our interaction with it, and that's where everything starts to break down, because this idea that consciousness, the simple act of awareness, plays a role in shaping reality, throws a wrench into everything. Science used to believe in the old Newtonian view of the world. The universe was like a giant machine. Every gear had a purpose, every action had an equal and opposite reaction. Everything was physical, measurable, and separate. But then came Max Planck, the father of quantum physics. He discovered that energy is not continuous but exists in tiny packets called quanta, and he didn't stop there. In one of his most overlooked but most powerful statements, he said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." Let that sink in. Not the other way around. Consciousness comes first, matter comes second. That means reality doesn't create you, you create reality. And yet this idea isn't new. Mystic sages and spiritual teachers have been saying the same thing for thousands of years. Buddha taught that the mind is the forerunner of all things. Neville Goddard claimed that imagination is the only reality. Even the ancient Hermetic texts declared the all is mind. So how is it that science, the most rational of all disciplines, has stumbled into a truth that spirituality has known all along?